At my father's retirement celebration, my perfect brother made a speech mocking how I still work retail at 35 while living with mom and dad. Everyone laughed as I smiled through the humiliation, but I quietly planned my payback. Days later, my phone exploded with 47 angry calls from family. Be me. Been sitting here for almost an hour trying to figure out how to start this. My hands are still shaking while typing this out. Guess I'll just dive in. 2 months ago, my parents celebrated their 40th anniversary. Big deal for everyone, right? They rented out this mid-tier restaurant near our hometown. Nothing fancy, but nice enough that everyone wore something better than jeans. Mom Liz spent weeks obsessing over every detail, making sure her friends from church would be impressed. Dad Thomas just nodded along like he always does. Almost didn't go. Seriously considered faking some stomach bug or whatever. Being the family disappointment gets exhausting when everyone's together in one room staring at you. But I went because, well, 40 years is 40 years. And underneath all the BS, I do love my parents. For context, I'm 37. Yes, I live in my parents' basement. Yes, I dropped out of vet school 7 years ago, after having what my therapist diplomatically calls a significant mental health episode. Translation: complete breakdown during finals. Been working at a local hardware store while trying to figure my life out. Not exactly the American dream, but I'm not on drugs or in prison, so there's that. My brother David, on the other hand, golden child, literally can't fail. Investment broker with his own firm. Huge house in the nice part of town. Perfect wife Christine, who has like 50,000 followers on Instagram, posting about their authentic family journey. And 2 kids who are obviously being prepped for Yale from the womb. The party started out fine. Everyone was mingling, eating those tiny appetizers that never fill you up. I stuck to the corner nursing a beer, making small talk with my cousin, who's the only person who treats me like a normal human. Mom kept giving me these looks across the room. Half, "I'm glad you're here," and half, "Please don't embarrass us." I'm used to those looks. After dinner, Dad got up to give his speech about their marriage. Standard stuff about love and partnership, blah blah. Mom cried right on cue. People clapped, all according to script. Then David stood up and grabbed the microphone. "I'd like to say something too," he said, flashing that perfect smile that probably costs more than my monthly rent. Everyone turned to look at him, because of course they did. He started talking about family and how our parents had taught us values and whatever. I zoned out until he suddenly looked directly at me. "Let's raise a toast to Mom and Dad for their patience with their second son. The one who dropped out of vet school and still lives in their basement at 37. The room exploded with laughter. Every single person laughing. Someone pointed at me. Then more people. Mom's face did that thing where she's trying to look disapproving, but is actually amused. Dad stared at his plate. My cousin mumbled, "That's messed up," but didn't say anything louder. Don't remember exactly what happened next. My face burned so hot I thought I might pass out under the table. My hands were shaking so bad I had to press them against my thighs. Someone patted my shoulder like it was a joke we were all in on. I forced the fakest smile of my life, while David finished his hilarious toast with something about family sticking together through thick and thin. The rest of the night is a blur of avoidance. Remember hiding in the bathroom scrolling through my phone for 20 minutes? Remember Mom's friend asking if I had any prospects with this pitying look? Remember wondering how much trouble I'd get in if I accidentally spilled my drink on David's ridiculously expensive shoes? Drove home alone. Everyone else stayed for the after party. As soon as I got to my car, I screamed. Like full-on primal scream that probably scared the hell out of the people in the parking lot. Then I cried like I haven't since the day I walked out of vet school. Ugly, snotty crying while punching my steering wheel. The thing is, this wasn't new. David's been doing this my entire life. When we were kids, he'd wait until friends were over to mention how I wet the bed until I was 9. In high school, he'd casually bring up my rejection letters when his friends were around. When I got into vet school, he started making jokes about how I'd kill my first patient. It never stopped. And my parents, they've always given me those sad smiles afterward. The "we love you anyway" looks that actually mean we're disappointed but trying not to show it. They never really stood up for me. Not once. Got home before everyone else. Just lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling of my basement apartment. Let's be real, it's just a finished basement with a bathroom. Could hear them all come home later, laughing and talking. Mom came down to check on me, but I pretended to be asleep. That night I decided something had to change. Not some vague, "I'll show them someday" fantasy. Something real. The next morning was Sunday brunch. This mandatory family tradition my mom insists on. Usually I fake being sick, but that day I decided to go. Needed to see David's smug face in the daylight. Needed to remind myself why I was so angry. That's when I overheard something interesting. Was grabbing orange juice from the fridge when I heard David and his business partner Lucas on the back deck. They didn't know I was there. They were talking in low voices, but the window was open. "The Johnson account is getting complicated," Lucas was saying. "The old man's daughter is asking questions about the allocation. She doesn't understand the paperwork." David responded, "Just reschedule the meeting until after the Williams transfer clears. We'll have it covered by then. And if she brings her lawyer like she threatened?" "Jesus, Lucas, do I have to think of everything?" "Tell her I'm taking a personal day. Family emergency or something. We just need 2 more weeks." Didn't sound right even with my limited knowledge. Moving clients' money around to cover other accounts sounded sketchy. AF. I quietly took my phone out and started recording. They talked for another 10 minutes about moving assets and temporary allocations and a bunch of other stuff that sounded increasingly illegal. When I went back to the dining room, David gave me that same condescending smile from the party. "Look who decided to join the land of the living." Everyone chuckled. I just stared at him, seeing him differently now. After brunch, I did something I hadn't done in years. Went to the local coffee shop and opened my laptop. Started researching financial regulations and investment advisor requirements. 7 hours and 6 overpriced lattes later, I had confirmed what I suspected. David was doing some seriously questionable stuff with his clients' money. I also found Christine's Instagram. Between the perfect family photos and #blessed captions, there were hints of trouble. Passive-aggressive captions about partners being present. Comments from friends saying, "Stay strong." The kind of social media cries for help that people post when their life is falling apart. But they're trying to maintain the image. Over the next week, I dug deeper. Used my basement dweller status as cover. Nobody questions why the family disappointment spends all day online. Found David had been taking money from elderly clients, using it for his own investments, promising returns he couldn't deliver. Classic Ponzi-adjacent scheme. He was also apparently cheating on Christine with someone from his gym. According to some spicy DMs I found, when I borrowed his tablet while he was swimming in Mom and Dad's pool, I could have exposed him immediately. Posted everything online, called his clients, told Christine, but something inside me wanted more. Wanted him to feel what I felt at that party. Complete and total humiliation with nowhere to hide. So I started planning meticulously. Using the analytical skills that once made me a promising vet student, created a timeline, gathered evidence, identified vulnerabilities. For once, being invisible to my family worked in my favor. Nobody noticed me taking photos of documents David left lying around. Nobody questioned why I was suddenly interested in financial news. It's been 2 months now. 2 months of smiling through family dinners, while David continues to make his little digs about my failed career. 2 months of planning the perfect moment. 2 months of waiting for the anniversary of my humiliation. Tomorrow is the big day. David's receiving some industry award at a fancy ceremony. Everyone will be there. His clients, his colleagues, Christine broadcasting it all over her social media. Mom and Dad are so proud. They've been telling everyone at church, everything is ready. The evidence is organized. The emails are scheduled. The truth is packaged and ready to be delivered to exactly the right people at exactly the right time. Tonight, as I finalize the last details, I keep hearing his voice in my head. Let's toast to Mom and Dad for their patience with their second son, and for the first time in 2 months, that memory doesn't make my hands shake. It makes me smile, because by this time tomorrow, David's perfect life is going to implode spectacularly, and I'm going to watch it happen, with a glass of the same champagne they were drinking, when they all laughed at me. I'll update tomorrow after it all goes down. Wish me luck. Update 1. First, holy shit at all the comments and DMs. Didn't expect this to blow up like it did. For everyone asking if I'm really going through with it. This update should answer that question. The morning after I posted part 1, I woke up to my mom knocking on my basement door. She had made my favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes. Wanted to know if I was feeling okay because I seemed different lately. Translation: she was worried I was spiraling again. Like during the vet school disaster. Perfect timing, really. Did what I've gotten so good at. Played the part of slightly damaged but recovering son. Told her I was actually feeling better than I had in years. That I was applying for jobs and thinking about moving out soon. Her face lit up so fast, it almost made me feel guilty about what I was planning. Almost. Here's the thing about being the family disappointment. People stop watching you closely. They check in occasionally to make sure you're not completely falling apart. But they don't pay attention to what you're actually doing. It's like being invisible in plain sight. For the past 2 months, I've been using that invisibility like a superpower. Week 1 after the anniversary disaster, I established my routine. Mornings at the local library using their computers instead of my own. Thanks to the commenter who pointed out IP addresses can be traced. Smart thinking. Afternoons at work at the hardware store. Evenings job hunting, aka building my case against David in the basement. Nobody questioned it because it fit their image of me, trying to get my shit together. My first real move was reaching out to Christine. This was trickier than I expected. We've never been close. She's always treated me with that special kind of pity, reserved for her husband's loser brother. But I had noticed something during family dinners over the past year. She kept mentioning these stress headaches she was getting. Remember how I said I dropped out of vet school? Well, I didn't drop out because I was stupid. I dropped out because of anxiety and depression. That turned into a full-blown breakdown during finals. But I still remember a lot of what I learned, especially about common stress symptoms and treatments. So I coincidentally ran into her at Target one afternoon. She was in the pharmacy section looking at different pain relievers. I casually mentioned something about ibuprofen causing rebound headaches with overuse, and suggested a different combination that might help based on her symptoms. The medical jargon caught her off guard. People forget I was actually good at the doctor stuff before I cracked. That conversation turned into coffee, which turned into regular texts about her health issues. Within 2 weeks, I was her go-to source for medical advice. She started opening up about other things. How stressed she was with maintaining her social media presence. How the kids were struggling with their packed schedules. How David was working late more and more. I played my part perfectly. Sympathetic ear. No judgment. Just a concerned brother-in-law who had the time to listen. Because, no real responsibilities in my basement life. Every conversation was a goldmine of information. I recorded nothing, but I remembered everything. Meanwhile, I was working on David's business angle. This was harder since I couldn't exactly walk into his office, but family gatherings became intelligence gathering opportunities. I'd purposely bring up topics that might get David talking about work, asked innocent questions about investment strategy. Once I even pretended to be interested in investing my savings, LOL, and got him to explain his approach to client management. The real breakthrough came when I volunteered to help my parents with their computer issues. Dad had been complaining about email problems for weeks. While fixing things, I set up forwarding for any emails from David, to also go to a throwaway account I created. Morally questionable, maybe. But I wasn't changing anything, just seeing what David was already sending them. That's how I discovered David had been borrowing money from my parents, not asking for loans, actually moving funds from their retirement accounts that he managed. The emails were carefully worded, but it was clear he was using their money to cover his business expenses, promising returns that hadn't materialized. 3 weeks in, I hit another goldmine. David had left his laptop at my parents' house when he rushed out after a Sunday dinner. He'd forgotten to log out of his email. I had about 20 minutes before someone noticed. My hands shook as I quickly forwarded key emails to my burner account and took screenshots of his calendar. That's when I found emails between David and someone named Vanessa. At first, I thought it might be a client. It wasn't. The messages started professional but quickly turned personal, then sexual. I felt gross reading them but also vindicated. Perfect family man, David was having an affair with a colleague at work. But the biggest revelation came from his meeting schedule. David had been meeting with the same 4 elderly clients repeatedly. The Wilsons, the Johnsons, the Parkers, and Mrs. Takahashi, cross-referencing with other emails. I realized these were wealthy clients whose accounts David was using to cover losses with other investments. Classic Ponzi-adjacent scheme, just like I suspected. By month 2, I had enough evidence to completely destroy David's career. But I wanted more. I wanted to understand why he turned out this way. Why he felt the need to put me down to build himself up. Why our parents always let it happen. So I did something risky. I started asking questions, not direct accusations, but wondering aloud to my mom about whether she thought David seemed stressed lately. Mentioning to my dad that I'd overheard David arguing on the phone about money. Small comments designed to gauge their reaction. What I learned was both surprising and sadly predictable. Mom revealed that David had always been jealous of how easily academics came to me when we were younger. That before my issues started, teachers had always said I was the one with real potential. Dad reluctantly admitted that David had struggled with massive student loans and had made some aggressive investments early in his career that hadn't panned out. They weren't excusing his behavior exactly, but they were explaining it, and in the process, revealing that they knew David could be cruel to me. They just chose to ignore it, because dealing with it would mean acknowledging their perfect son wasn't so perfect. That conversation was 2 weeks ago. It left me feeling hollow, but more determined than ever. Not just to expose David, but to force my parents to see what they've enabled all these years. The final phase involved 3 careful preparations. First, I created 3 separate packages of evidence. One for my parents containing proof of how David had mismanaged their retirement funds. One for Christine with carefully selected screenshots of David's affair, Not the graphic stuff, just enough to prove it was happening. And one comprehensive file for David's business partners and key clients, documenting the pattern of financial mismanagement. Second, I set up a fake job interview for myself, in a town 2 hours away, scheduled for the morning of David's award ceremony. The perfect alibi for why I wouldn't be around when everything blew up. Mom was so excited about the interview, she didn't even question the timing. Third, I had the hardest conversation of my life with my parents last night. I sat them down and told them I knew what David had been doing with their money. I didn't reveal my whole plan, just enough to make them understand their golden child had been using them. Mom cried. Dad got angry, then quiet. They didn't want to believe me. But the evidence was right there in black and white. Transfers from their accounts that they'd never authorized. Falsified return statements. I left them with a choice. They could confront David themselves before his big ceremony, or I would ensure everyone knew what he'd been doing. I didn't threaten or yell, just stated facts and walked away. For the first time in my adult life, I saw them look at me with something other than disappointment. This morning I woke up early, packed a small bag for my job interview, set up the scheduled emails to deliver the remaining evidence packages at precisely 2 p.m. Right when David would be on stage accepting his award. As I was heading out the door, I heard my parents arguing upstairs. Dad was saying they needed to call David immediately. Mom was saying they should wait until after the ceremony. Neither of them had a clue about the full scale of what was coming. I left the house feeling strangely calm, drove to a coffee shop in the next town over, ordered a large coffee and opened my laptop. Then I waited. At exactly 2 p.m., my phone started blowing up. First a text from Christine, just a row of question marks. Then calls from my parents. Then David again and again. I watched the notifications pile up without answering. At 2:15, Christine went live on Instagram from the award venue. Her face was streaked with tears as she started talking about betrayal and lies to her 50,000 followers. In the background, I could see David trying to grab her phone, while people stared. By 2:30, David's business partner Lucas was calling me too. Funny, he'd never called me before in his life. Google alerts I'd set up for David's name started pinging. Someone at the ceremony was live tweeting the meltdown. I'm sitting here now, still in that coffee shop, watching it all unfold from a safe distance. David's perfect life is imploding in real time, and all I had to do was reveal the truth he'd been hiding. The strangest part, I don't feel as good as I thought I would. There's satisfaction, yes, but also this weight in my chest. Not regret exactly, more like the realization that this won't fix everything. It won't erase years of being the family disappointment. It won't heal all those wounds, but it's a start. My phone is still buzzing. I should probably answer eventually. But right now, I'm just sitting here, watching the notifications stack up, thinking about how David must be feeling. Is he shaking like I was at that anniversary dinner? Is he forcing a smile while everyone stares? God, I hope so. I'll update again after I head home and deal with the fallout. This is just the beginning. Last update. Last night I didn't sleep at all. Just stared at my phone watching notifications pile up like dead bodies in a disaster movie. 37 missed calls. 62 text messages. The digital aftermath of a nuclear explosion I'd carefully engineered. Around 3 a.m., I finally turned my phone off completely. Sat in the darkness of my motel room. Yeah, I didn't go home after the coffee shop. Not that stupid. And just breathed. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt this weird lightness in my chest. Not happiness exactly. More like space. Room to exist without the constant weight of being the disappointment. I turned my phone back on at 7 a.m. 5 new voicemails from David. Each one progressively more unhinged. The last one just heavy breathing and what sounded like crying. Part of me wanted to save it as my new ringtone. The rest of me just felt hollow. My parents had texted repeatedly, asking where I was, if I was safe, when I was coming home. Nothing about David or what had happened. Classic Liz and Thomas. Avoid the elephant in the room until it literally tramples someone to death. The most surprising message was from Christine. Just 3 words. We need to talk. No anger, no accusations. Just that simple request hanging in digital space. I checked some messages from people who'd been at the ceremony. Apparently David had lunged for Christine's phone during her Instagram live, knocking over a glass of water, with his business partner Lucas physically restraining him, while people stared in shock. The small circle of colleagues and clients who witnessed it were messaging each other frantically, trying to figure out what was happening. I showered, packed my overnight bag, and checked out of the motel. Sat in my car for 20 minutes trying to decide where to go. Not home, not yet. Eventually I drove to the local diner where I used to study during vet school. Ordered coffee and eggs, and tried to look like a normal person whose life wasn't imploding, exploding simultaneously. That's when my phone rang again. Mom? I almost didn't answer, but something in me had changed. I wasn't hiding anymore. She was crying before I even said hello, babbling about how David had been arrested. Arrested. That wasn't part of my plan. Apparently, one of his elderly clients had immediately called the authorities after receiving my evidence package. Something about David already being under investigation for financial irregularities. The police had been waiting for solid evidence, and I'd gift-wrapped it for them. Mom kept asking if I knew. If this was what I wanted, why would I do this to the family? Not once did she ask why David had done what he did. I let her talk herself out, then simply said I was coming home and we'd discuss it there. The drive back felt surreal, like I was floating above myself, watching someone else navigate traffic. I kept waiting for regret or guilt to hit me, but it didn't come. Just this strange, calm certainty that I'd done what needed to be done. When I pulled into the driveway, Dad was waiting on the porch. He looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him. Shoulders hunched, face gray. He didn't speak as I approached, just opened the door and gestured me inside. Mom was at the kitchen table surrounded by tissues. She was scrolling through messages from family friends, who'd somehow already heard about what happened. Word travels fast in a tight-knit community. Even without making headlines, the three of us sat in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, Dad spoke. He asked why I hadn't just come to them with what I knew about David. Why the public humiliation? Why destroy everything in one day? I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. Asked him if he remembered the anniversary party. If he remembered doing nothing while David humiliated me in front of everyone we knew. If he remembered every single family gathering, where David's jokes about my failures went unchallenged. Mom started crying again. Dad stared at his hands. I realized with sudden clarity that they weren't angry about what I'd done. They were angry I'd forced them to see what they'd been ignoring for years. I was about to say more, when the front door slammed open. David, his perfect hair disheveled, tie loose around his neck, eyes wild in a way I'd never seen before. He'd obviously been released on bail. He saw me and lunged, literally lunged across the room like some animal. Dad barely caught him before he reached me. Started screaming about how I'd ruined everything, how I'd always been jealous, how I'd never amount to anything. I just stood there, didn't flinch, didn't back away. Looked him right in the eyes and said, "At least I never stole from elderly people or cheated on my wife." He broke, collapsed against Dad, sobbing about how it wasn't supposed to be like this, how he just needed a little more time to fix his investments, how Vanessa didn't mean anything, how he'd felt trapped by the perfect life everyone expected. In that moment, looking at my brother crumpled on our parents' kitchen floor, I had this bizarre realization. David was just as fucked up as me. Maybe more. He'd just been better at hiding it. Mom made us all sit down, made tea nobody wanted, tried to mediate like this was some childhood squabble over a toy, and not the complete implosion of our family dynamic. It was so ridiculous I almost started laughing again. David wouldn't look at me, kept addressing everything to our parents like I wasn't there, said he'd fix everything, get a good lawyer, make things right with Christine, rebuild his business reputation. Dad finally stopped him, just held up his hand and said, "Enough, David." It was the first time I'd ever heard him speak to Golden Child with anything less than admiration. "You stole from us, from your clients. You lied to everyone." The silence after that was deafening. My phone buzzed. Text from Christine. "I'm outside." I excused myself and went to the front porch. She was sitting in her ridiculous luxury SUV, sunglasses covering what I assumed were puffy eyes. I got in. We sat in silence for a minute before she handed me her phone. On the screen was a text exchange between her and David from months ago. She'd suspected the affair, confronted him. He'd gaslit her, made her feel crazy and paranoid, made her believe she was the problem in their marriage. She wasn't crying, wasn't yelling, just sitting there with this eerie calmness, asking what else I knew, what else David had been hiding. I told her everything, the financial stuff, the manipulations, all of it. By the end, she was nodding, like someone confirming a diagnosis they'd already suspected. Before I got out of the car, she thanked me for blowing up her marriage, said she'd been feeling like she was going crazy for months, questioning her own perception, said the truth, however painful, was better than living a lie. When I went back inside, David was gone. Mom said he'd left to talk to his lawyer. Dad was making calls to their bank, trying to assess the damage to their retirement accounts. I went down to my basement room and started packing. Not everything, just enough for a few days. I needed space to think, to process what had happened and what came next. As I was zipping up my bag, Dad appeared at the bottom of the stairs. He looked lost standing there, in the doorway to the room I'd occupied as an adult for far too long. He asked where I was going. I said I didn't know yet, just that I couldn't stay here right now. Then he did something completely unexpected. He apologized. Not just for today, or for the anniversary, but for years of allowing David's behavior, for not seeing what was happening between his sons, for failing both of us in different ways. It wasn't a movie moment. He didn't cry or hug me or suddenly transform into Father of the Year. Just a tired old man, finally acknowledging a truth he'd been avoiding for decades. I nodded, not ready to forgive, but recognizing the effort it took him to say it. That was yesterday. Today I woke up in another motel room, checked my phone to find the situation continuing to unfold in our small circle. David's company had issued a statement to clients, temporarily relieving him of his duties pending investigation. Christine had filed for emergency custody of their kids. I've spent the day ignoring calls and thinking about what comes next. The revenge is done, but I don't feel the victory I expected. Instead, there's this weird emptiness, like I've been running a marathon for years, and suddenly crossed a finish line I didn't see coming. One thing's clear though, I can't go back to the basement, can't return to being the disappointment. That version of me died the moment I decided to fight back. I just got off the phone with my cousin, the only family member who's ever treated me normally. He's offered his spare room while I figure things out. Said he was proud of me for standing up for myself, even if the method was nuclear-level petty. Made me laugh for the first time in days. David texted once today, "I hope you're happy now." I didn't respond. There's nothing left to say between us. Mom keeps sending links to family therapy options. Dad hasn't reached out at all. The family group chat that used to buzz with David's achievements, and my conspicuous absence, is completely silent. I don't know what happens now. Don't know if our family recovers from this, or if we're permanently broken. Don't know if David faces real consequences, or if money and privilege protect him once again. All I know is that I'm not shaking anymore. My hands are steady as I type this. The basement dweller, the vet school dropout, the family disappointment, he's gone. I'm someone else now, someone who fought back. Maybe that's enough for now.